Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about a show that I just now finished watching. It took me 3 whole months just to watch this show. I kid you not. It took me that long. It was a chore. Basically, I had to hate watch this show because this show is so boring, so bleak, so like just it took so long for them to get to the point of the whole story and then to execute it in the way they wanted to execute it. It's just a dreary type show. And that show is The Hardy Boys. No, not these Hardy Boys. Haha, there we go. These Hardy Boys. Now, when I first saw this show pop up on Hulu, I think it came out in December. And as of the recording of now is March the 1st, this show has not been renewed yet. It hasn't been canceled either, but it hasn't been renewed. And you would think that it wouldn't take this long for a show to get renewed. If it was popular enough, then it would, but it hasn't. Now, the Hardy Boys are based off a series of novels. They came out in the late 1920s, around 1927 probably. And I've never read none of them, but I am familiar, with the Hardy Boys. Not necessarily their names at that time or the characters in that thing, but I know that they are kind of like these junior detective type teenagers or kids, depending on which one you read. And they they try to solve crimes and they look for treasure and stuff like that. Now, when you look at these book covers, it looks very exciting. It's just like, oh, wow, I wonder what the story's going to be about. And then when, you think of a show, you're like, oh, wow, well, the show must be that great too, if these book covers are any indication. But no, it's not. It's very, 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 very boring. It's lackluster. Now, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy, but speaking of Nancy Drew, which is for the most part a more superior television show. It's not perfect. There are flaws in this show, but for the most part, it keeps me entertained and it keeps me intrigued and it makes me wonder what's the next episode going to be about. Nancy Drew is also based off a series of novels also about, once again, a junior detective written by the same person that wrote The Hardy Boys. Nancy Drew came out in 1930. And she has a slew of books just like The Hardy Boys. And in fact, they've even teamed up together in the books and have even teamed up in older TV shows. There was this older TV show that had them team up. This series will not allow them to team up with the Hardy Boys. Reason being is one, Hardy Boys is on Hulu and Nancy Drew is on the CW. Now, they could work something out, but I don't know if they ever will, because as long as I know, there's no CW show on Hulu. They're only on Netflix or the CWC or their own app. Also, it's going to be impossible for them to cross over because they take place in different time eras. The Hardy Boys take place in the 1980s and Nancy Drew takes place in the modern day. It came out in 2019 and it's in its second season in 2021 and it's about to get a third season very soon. Despite being detectives and despite their novels, both their TV shows take a different approach. Nancy Drew deals more with the paranormal, supernatural, demons and ghosts, mainly ghosts, but like ghost demons and stuff like that. Whereas the Hardy Boys, they take more of a treasure hunt type style, and I guess you could probably say magical, supernatural type stuff. Basically, you need a MacGuffin, and the MacGuffin does something. Personally, I would prefer it if both these shows were more like traditional, like detective type shows, to where, there's like a murder or something's been stolen and they have to like go around town looking for clues and trying to solve it. But more of a realistic, like looking for a human type thing, other than looking for some magical type thing, or looking for, say, trying to solve a ghost, or to try to solve a murder that deals with ghosts and demons. Now, both these shows are very similar, just like the books. In the books is teen detectives. Your protagonists, they have a group of friends who help them along every now and then both these characters have their mother die in the novel. They try to solve that like mystery. The shows do a very similar approach too. However, I guess that's one reason why the Hardy Boys is set up in the 80s, because they kind of don't want to have fans be all like, oh, well, cross over with Nancy Drew, because Nancy Drew is in the modern day. And both shows and networks want to compete. However, if they didn't want the Hardy Boys TV show to be similar to that of Nancy Drew, I don't know why they would have certain parallels with them, mainly in the characters' betrayal and personalities. Now, both shows take central characters from their books and they incorporate them in the television show. However, they changed certain things. They've race bent a couple of people. They've gender bent one person. And then one person's been added to the show that's completely new, so they can pretty much just toy around with whatever they want to do with it. I'll give you some examples. Okay, both our protagonists are the stars of this show. Their mothers have died. They're detective. They are junior detectives. Nancy is no longer a junior detective because now she's an adult, but it's stated in the show she's one of the greatest detectives of all time when she was a teenager. The love interest has been race bent. Basically, Callie is the equivalent of Nick on Nancy Drew's show. Biff has been gender bent and race bent. Biff, instead of being a tall, white, muscular guy, is now a short Asian female. And her counterpart on the Nancy Drew show is George, or some people call it Georgie, but for the most part it's George, because George and Nancy Drew was pretty much just this white dude. And so not only did they race bend both these characters to have the same exact race for both shows, they gender bent them all as well. Also, they have similar personalities. They're both slightly blunt and they're more they're not aggressive, but they're sarcastic in a kind of smart mouth, rude kind of way. Chet, he's different in the books. In the books, he's kind of like shorter, a little bit bigger. In this show, he's been race bent. Basically, he's kind of like not so much an aristocrat, but his family, they have money. He has scholarships. He's trying to go to like a really good school. He's slightly more polished, I guess you could say, in demeanor and tone and the way he talks. And his equivalent on Nancy Drew is Bess. Bess is an extreme aristocrat, comes from a very rich family. She's very posh. She's very nice. Chet is kind of nice, but they're like the same on this show. Phil's more like the computer whiz expert type person, and his equivalent on the Nancy Drew show is Ace. Ace is the like techno wizard of the show. He hacks and this stuff. When it comes to Phil, of course, since they're in the 80s, he doesn't do that much computer stuff, but he does other electronic type stuff. He's more like the go-to guy when it comes to like electronics. Also, these two characters are very similar because, okay, if you were to take one character out of a show, it would be these characters. There's nothing necessarily wrong with these characters. It's just they don't do much for this show, and they always find a way to cram them into the show to actually give them a purpose. when it comes to like the techno stuff. And it's kind of like they're just bland. Like there's nothing exciting about them. Like you could literally take them out the show and it won't change nothing. Now Phil comes from the books, but Ace, I cannot find no mention of him whatsoever. Also, they're the only two people in the show who don't have a love interest, and we don't know which way they go. However, when it comes to Phil, it is slightly hinted he might be gay. As for Ace, I don't know. He's just there, you know? I remember when I first started watching Nancy Drew, I saw the trailer, and the trailer looked really cool. And I'm thinking to myself, cool, I get to watch this detective type show. She's solving like murders, probably, missing people type stuff. And she does that in the show, but then it took a supernatural element, paranormal element, and I was very shocked. I'm like, where did this come from? What I didn't realize is they had a whole new series of like books and games on Nancy Drew where she deals in this type of stuff. So, yeah. Now, enough about Nancy Drew. Now, let's get on to the Hardy Boys. So, like I said before, this show was extremely difficult for me to get into. I wanted so badly to like this show. Because, you know, it has a detective element. And I love detective type elements. It's fun to, like, you know, just go along with the... Well, it's cool for the audience just to go along with the characters and see how they try to solve stuff, and then you try to solve it at home. You know, stuff like that. It's fun. Also, another similarity is after the love interest is broken up with their significant other, they fall in love with the frenemy. So that's like really weird because like George and Ned, they're together now, and at the end of the Hardy Boys, Frank and Callie are together. And this show has all the tropes of like detective type stuff and trying to solve mysteries, you know. There are a bunch of people going around in spooky areas with flashlights. There are like coded descriptions to like decipher. There are like strange artifacts that hide like other artifacts and other things that people are looking for. You know, you have people trying to like lock picks into like these like hidden places, and you know, it's just like little fun stuff. However, this show is not fun whatsoever. It's just very dry. It's very, very slow paced. And it's just like, you know, get to the point already, you know? And when it does get to the point, it just still goes in a slow, dreary, boring kind of pace. Like, this thing has all the cliches of old school detective type stuff, and yet it still comes off very boring. It's very bland. One problem I have with this show is kind of the same reason why I have a problem with Nancy Drew, is like when the audience is watching the characters do their detective stuff, you want to follow along with them. The problem is, because they're making things up and they have all this weird stuff, you're not really sure what you're looking at first until you actually, okay, this is what I'm looking at. Also, it's always rushed. Like when they're like searching for something or they get a new clue and they're trying to figure something out, it's very rushed. And the characters, well, at least on the Hardy Boys, they're able to figure something out like really fast. And it's kind of like, oh, how'd you figure that out really fast without doing any kind of research? And it's kind of like, you don't want somebody to be like a super genius and figure something out like really fast. You want to, you know, have time. You want to like spread it out. You want to see how they came up to this conclusion. And even when they do try to figure out to a conclusion, it's always rushed because somebody there always like knows something like really, really smart. And it gets kind of annoying because you want to be able to follow along. Now, there are other shows that do this so much better. There are so many movies that do this so much better. And, you know, like National Treasure, it does this in a whole lot better way. The Indiana Jones movies does this. Tomb Raider does this in a better way. Relic Hunter was an amazing show. I think it came out in the late 90s. I remember being in high school. And it's just, you know, similar to the Hardy Boys, is a person, or it's similar more to Indiana Jones, is a professor who travels around the world looking for these artifacts. Some artifacts are just regular artifacts, and other ones are like more supernatural and stuff and magical. It's like you go from clue to clue to clue, and even though you might not understand what's going on, you're still engaged in the show because there's enough stuff to keep you hyped for the show. Ghost Rider was an awesome show for kids. It was a PBS show. It was about a group of young detectives that come together because of a ghost that can only see through writing. They always tried to solve mysteries that was going on in their town, like maybe somebody's house would not, oh, somebody's business would burn down, somebody gets framed for something, um, uh, some like stuff in the museum gets stolen. These kids will go day by day, and and they will explain to you how to like search for stuff. They'll teach you how to decode things. They will teach you how to look for clues, how to write clues down, how to get organized. It was a really good show. Now I'll go slightly more in depth with that because I made another video before I made this one, and I talked a little briefly about it. And see, but then I decided, oh, okay, I'm gonna pause on that video because I want to hurry and do the Hardy Boys because I mentioned that before. There are even great cop dramas that deal in detective type stuff. There's Cold Case, Without a Trace. Without a Trace was a really great show about missing people. There's even this Disney show that I accidentally came across because I don't watch Disney Channel. The only show on Disney Channel I watch is like Bunked, and that's only because I love Jesse, and that's the spinoff of it. But like, there's this show called The Secrets of Sulphur Springs, I think, and it basically is not a detective show per se, but it just deals in a spooky element of what happened to this girl in the 1990s who just disappeared without a trace. Was she kidnapped? Was she murdered? Did she disappear through some magic MacGuffin? And this is a Disney Channel show. Like Disney Channel, and it is not your typical Disney Channel show either. It's more eerie and like spooky kind of, because you want to know what happened to this little girl. Now of course there are still some like childish moments in it because this is a Disney show and they can't be too scary for little kids, but I'm very shocked and surprised and very pleased that Disney is going in this different direction than their wackadoo type shows, because Disney hasn't went in this direction since the late 90s with a show called So Weird. And So Weird, it was an excellent spooky horror type show, but it was still aimed for kids, but it dealt in the supernatural and the freakiness of the supernatural. Even the Amazon show Just Add Magic, which I have talked about before but never in great detail, does a better job than the Hardy Boys to build suspense and do detective work. And this is a show about like a magic cookbook. Like I'm telling you people, this is the show. It's for all ages. You can be a kid, a teen, an adult, it don't matter. You can get into this show. It's not overall scary. It keeps you intrigued. There's lots of suspense through pretty much every episode, and it's also lighthearted enough, like not to scare little kids and stuff. I'm telling y'all, this is the show. I mean, even like heck, even Nancy Drew, like I said, is not perfect, but it's a whole lot better than the Hardy Boys. The whole paranormal ghost demon thing, it really keeps you like intrigued. And in the first season, I didn't think I was going to see that. And I'm like, oh, where's this going to? Now in the second season, they kind of go overboard with the ghostly stuff. There's less human detective like looking for crap. There's just more like, oh, okay, we have to look for who killed this dead person, and oh, now there's a curse on us, and now there's a ghost demon, and then we defeat the ghost demon, but now this other ghost has come around and has possessed my friend, and it goes in that direction. So, okay, Hardy Boys, where do I begin? I'm not gonna go episode per episode because every episode is pretty much the same and very lackluster. Y'all ready to rock with me? Let's rock. So, the first episode pretty much starts off with the Hardy Boys in their home with the parents. Then it cuts away from there, and it goes to this boat. And on this boat, these people have found some wreckage. So they go and they search for it. And this one guy's all like, there's a box. And the captain of that boat is all like, you know, get the box. But he does it in a very like obvious, okay, something's up kind of way. And then when he gets the box, he calls somebody and tells them that he found the artifact that they're looking for. Next thing you know, this extremely scary man known as the Tall Man, which is basically his only description. Like, he doesn't have a name. He's just this tall, scary guy. He gets the box with the artifact in it, and he kills everybody on that boat, I think except for one person. Now, the Hardy Boys reminds me so much of Laura Craft, or Laura. I don't know how the British people say it. They say it differently than us Americans. We say it Laura, but they say it Laura, I think. Craft. I'm just gonna say Laura because I'm an American. Laura Craft, the Tomb Raider, the very first movie, Angelina Jolie. This TV show builds very heavily on it. Basically, we have our protagonist. Our protagonist finds a magic MacGuffin that leads us to another magical MacGuffin. These MacGuffins look very similar. They're like this evil organization of people who want to get these MacGuffins and do bad things with it, because the MacGuffin is very powerful. Now, the evil organizations, one in Tomb Raider is the Illuminati, and the one in the Hardy Boys is called the Circle of the Eye. And basically their symbol looks very much like the Illuminati. There are a bunch of bad people in this organization that want the MacGuffin to do bad things. The MacGuffin is broken apart and put together and does all this like glowy type stuff. And then there's a strange little time travel type element in it. And that's what happens in the Tomb Raider. So basically you're just watching Tomb Raider but with a bunch of teenagers and stuff. That's also a lot more boring. So then it cuts from that and we see the Hardy Boys. They're at home with their mom and dad. Their dad, I believe, is a detective. Their mom, I think, writes for like a newspaper or something like that. And, you know, when we see their mom, the show is building us to believe, you know, she's like the best mom in the world. And it shows that she's very loving. She's very caring. She doesn't raise her voice. Like, you really root for this character and they want you to fall in love with this character so much because something bad's going to happen to her. She ends up getting murdered on the side of the road. At first, it's believed to be kind of like a freak accident type thing, but the family believes, no, this was no freak accident. They believe she was murdered. So then the family, they pack up and they're going to go live with their Aunt Trudy. And you know, the boys, they don't want to leave. They miss their friends and their girlfriends. Frank has a girlfriend. But you know, they're forced to leave. Now Frank is the older brother. He's a teenager. He has some muscles here and there because he plays baseball. I swear to God, this dude looks like Randy Orton from the WWE. Like, their facial features are similar, their mouths are similar, their eyes are similar. Like, every time I saw this dude, I'm just like, when are you gonna hit the RKO on somebody? I mean, he gets into a scuffle, but he doesn't hit that move on nobody. He's more the research type of dude when it comes to the detective work. He goes on stakeouts and he investigates stuff, but like, he's more of getting the information from people or getting the information from like a library. So he's not so much he's not so much the brains, but he does more of the research type stuff. And it's like the way he acts, like, it's weird. He's the oldest, but he acts like kind of like he's the youngest. And some of the things he say, you would expect kind of like a child kind of say. Joe. Joe is kind of different. Joe reminds me of an adult. Like, he talks like an adult. The things he say, a kid would never say. And it's just, they really wanted to mature this character, even though he's the youngest. And it's kind of weird, because it's weird hearing a kid talk like an adult. Like, that's one thing about TV shows nowadays, is like, people complain that, people never sound realistic. And Joe doesn't really sound all that realistic. Like, he's more mature verbally than Frank is. Now, Joe is more the go-getter. He will actually go and look for clues and look for locations and always get like entangled in something. He's always getting trapped. He's get kidnapped. He's less more of the research person, but he's just more of the, I gotta get up and go and do this type thing. Also, he wants to destroy this magic MacGuffin, whereas Frank. So they pack up and they go to Aunt Trudy's house. Now, Trudy's a very nice and caring woman. She's also overprotective. There's not much to Trudy. She's nice, she's caring, she's a painter, she has an overbearing aristocrat type mother, and she's in a secret relationship with Officer Jesse, and Jesse is the mother of Biff. There in this town, we meet Gloria Esterbrook, and she's the grandmother to the Hardy boys and the mother to Laura and Trudy. She's very overbearing. She's an aristocrat. She wants the best for her kids. She doesn't necessarily get along with Trudy all that much. She doesn't really get along with much people in town. People don't like her because of her father. Because her father was part of that secret organization that had the magic MacGuffin. He decided it's too powerful because it ended up killing how many was it? It was 4,000 people. They don't explain really what happened. All it is that people who get their hands on this MacGuffin, bad things will eventually happen because other people will try to get their hands on it and they start killing people, and there's just all kind of things. So it's like he knew this thing was too powerful and he didn't want the people in his organization to have it because there are two other powerful people in that organization. So he decides to break the thing apart, place it in artifacts, and send it around the world. So because of that, and because of how greedy he is with his money and taking people's land, people's businesses, people really don't like him and they don't like his daughter, which is Gloria. So Fenton is the dad, and he's a pretty awesome character. I wish the show would revolve around him. He's less Indiana Jones, but more James Bond. Like, this dude, like, when this is what happens. When he gets into town, he leaves the kids with Trudy because he then suspects that his wife was murdered because this woman, I'm gonna butcher her name, Kanika Khan. She's this older business type lady, and her father, he was part of the evil organization. Basically, it's like this. Her nephew, she overhears her nephew talking to Laura, when Laura is the Hardy boy's mother and Fenton's wife. He called her 3 times the day she was murdered. So she hires Fenton to go find her nephew. So that's why he leaves the boys with their aunt, because now he's going to figure out what happens, and he's gonna get some answers one way or another. Let's put it that way. So pretty much in that first episode, it just sets up the boys interacting with people in town, trying to get to know people. It's building up the character portrayals and stuff, and their interaction with people. We meet Biff, who instantly becomes friends with Joe. She's very sarcastic. She's very smart. Even though she's a kid, like I said, just like Joe, she doesn't really act like a kid. She's more mature, a whole lot more mature than Joe. Every time Joe is around her, his maturity drops and he becomes immature because he's trying to impress her and stuff. and he comes off pretty much like a dork every time like he hangs out with her. After Frank gets a job at this calf, he ends up becoming friends with Chet and Callie. Now, Chet and Callie, they are dating, and they're very nice. And when I see the way Callie looks, I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, I can see what's gonna happen. There's gonna be kind of like a love triangle, jealousy type thing. And for the most part, it does kind of happen that way. But not really so much the way you think. Because like I said, the writing isn't so great on this show, that it kind of like, you get that feeling, but it doesn't really do it that well. They also encounter a dude named Phil, and Phil is just this like goofball Lobo kind of guy. He's playing video games, he's into sci-fi type stuff. He's not much of a character on this show. He's just kind of like in his own kind of geeky kind of world. Before I go on, let me talk about the setting. Now, like I said before, this is in the 1980s, and you can tell it's in the 1980s because of their clothes they wear, the type of bikes they ride. I really love seeing them ride bikes around town. That's just something a kid would do in the 80s. And it's like they only do it 3 times in this show and very briefly. But it was just nice to see that, it just brings back memories of when you're a kid before like video games and tablets and the internet took over. Also, like more modern shows, this thing has like a color filter to it. It's more of a red golden type look, and it helps gives that 1980s feel. It also gives that old like treasure hunting type feel that like other movies have. So it's not too overbearing, but it helps make for like a lackluster, boring type show when you constantly see this filter and it never changes. It's great seeing like all the tech, the old school tech, like their old phones, and that thing on the right that the one girl's holding, that's a cell phone, a cell phone from the 1980s. I remember those things used to be so huge. I first saw one on Saved by the Bell when Zach had one. The walkie-talkies, man, who didn't have a walkie-talkie growing up? I know I did. Now that's not a computer. Computers weren't really commercial at that time. They were mostly for the government and businesses. I forgot what that is. I think it's like a photo projector. You find them in the library. You can even still find them in the library today. And he's looking up old articles, like newspaper articles and stuff. I will say, even though this is in the 1980s, one thing that doesn't make it feel like the 80s is the slang and the hairstyle. There is no 80s hairstyle whatsoever in this show. Like all the hairstyles are modern. And not only that, you don't hear no slang. You don't hear phrases like far out or groovy or like to the max, man. Nothing like that. You don't hear like that old school like slang. And so it's kind of like a little weird when you don't hear that because you're expecting to hear that being in like the 80s. If there was a movie, you would see and hear that. But, for these TV shows that keep trying to replicate this older style, they don't do that. I'm not really too sure why they decided to set it in the 80s. Like, there's really no reason. It doesn't, like, serve the plot. It's set in the 80s for some reason. Now that brings us to a different character named JB. JB is more the comic relief of the show. He brings like a whimsy to the show, which is much needed because this show is very bleak and very dry. However, even though it's much needed, it's very out of place with this show because this show is very serious. JB, he's a master thief. He does the whole old school like tricks of the trade. He's wearing disguises, mustache, wigs, all kind of stuff. Basically, he's on a plane and he's looking to steal the artifact from the tall man, which he ends up doing by causing a distraction on the plane. Then he goes into the restroom of the plane, and the next thing you know, the plane starts shaking. He's like opened up one of the doors and he literally leaps out the plane and he parachutes down. Yeah, this is very old school type stuff you would see like in like something that was written in 1920s or like something in 1980s James Bond type movie. The dude literally just parachutes to the ground. Now JB is a little bit of a mixed direction. You think at times he's gonna do bad stuff, but he really doesn't. Like, he's really a nice all-around guy. He actually befriends Joe in this whole show, which is very weird because Joe is a kid and he's a grown man. But you know, it's 1980s, and I guess that happens. Like, I don't know. Pretty much with him, it's kind of like, okay, he's been hired by Gloria to steal this MacGuffin. And so once he figures out this MacGuffin has some MacGuffinness to it, yeah, by the way, I'm gonna say the word MacGuffin like a lot. It's just fun to say. So in a way, once he starts seeing this MacGuffin has a special power, basically the one that Joe has and the one Gloria has, it makes you lucky. You can win anything. Pretty much like it makes outcomes, like you can see the outcome of something, and it just makes you very lucky. You start winning all kinds of stuff. And he decided, hey, you know, I can get rich off this. And if I combine all three, there's no telling what I could do. So he constantly, like, he's always sneaking into Joe's room, which is very creepy. And he's always like searching for like the artifact and like the MacGuffin and stuff like that. And then one time when he decided, you know what, I know where I can get all three pieces if I kidnap Joe. And he does end up kidnapping Joe like many episodes later. And so you think he's gonna hurt or kill Joe, but then he's like, oh, no, I ain't gonna hurt you, nothing like that. And then so he goes to like Joe's grandma's place to like ransom him off, and then the bodyguard pretty much like take care of that like really fast, and then no more ransom and no more kidnapping. And then they're all like, look, you know, you pissed me off, we're gonna call the cops. And then when the cops show up, the cop lets them go only to find the MacGuffin because they don't want nobody knowing that they're both working for Gloria. Yeah, the police chief in this episode or this series, he's working for Gloria. So he's like a crooked cop. Chief Ezra. And Chief Ezra is in the books also. But in the books, he's a much nicer guy. Sometimes he welcomes the Hardy Boys interference. Other time he doesn't want them to because it's like vigilantism. But yeah. In this show, he's pretty much like a crooked cop, which is something I've been noticing a lot now in modern day television. They're making all cops look bad. But I steered off course. Let me get back to the whole Chet Callie thing and what's his face? Frank. So when you see these three interact, you assume that, you know, there's gonna be like some type of love triangle thing, and it kind of is. Early in that episode, we find out that Frank's girlfriend has dumped him over the phone. Like, pretty much it's like this. They were only supposed to be there for the summer. And for the most part, they are. They stay a little bit longer. But she couldn't wait. She decides she wants to spread her wings now. So she dumps Frank, and it breaks his heart. He's sad. And then, you know, so then you think, okay, the moment he meets Callie, something's gonna happen. And that's around the time he does meet her. And she's very beautiful and stuff like that. So you assume, you know, something's gonna happen. Now, let's put a pin in that for a little bit later. Not a lot happens in this episode. Basically, the Hardy Boys realize that, oh, their mom might have been murdered. So now they decide they're gonna solve her murder. And pretty much that's it. Like, I fell asleep towards the end of this episode, so I'm not really too much sure what happened. I didn't want to rewind it because it was just so boring. But yeah, pretty much every episode is the same. The kids, they do their detective work. The adults are trying to steal these MacGuffins so they can give them to like the evil organization people. They're constantly stealing from one another. The kids, you know, they have their kid interactions. It's just, it's all the same. Like, it's constantly the same in every episode. However, we don't discover this magic MacGuffin is a MacGuffin See, first Joe finds it in an artifact. And when he has it, he just puts it in his pocket. But it isn't until the carnival episode until we start to see that this thing has like some magic to it. Like the piece of the eye is basically what it's called, but I keep calling it MacGuffin. When Joe's at the carnival, he realizing that he's winning every game and he knows he's not that skilled when it comes to like physical stuff. So he's not really sure, but because this show rushes everything, he deduces that, oh, it must be this magic MacGuffin. Because of this, I am now unlucky. I'm now lucky. And Biff is kind of like, you're dumb, you're stupid, there's no such thing as magic. That little thing you have in your pocket, isn't causing you to win, you're just getting lucky. And he proves to her that, hey, look, I'm going to keep playing all these games, and if I keep on winning, that's going to prove what I'm saying. So basically, it does. In comes the tall man. He shows up out of nowhere, and he starts like pursuing Joe. So they basically run and they run and they run, trying to get away from this man, because this man is going to do whatever it takes to get that MacGuffin. And this man is a murderer, so he has no problem killing a little kid. So after all that, pretty much like they tell the other group of kids, what happened. This guy's chasing him. They try to figure out why he's chasing them. And then they figure out, okay, maybe we can trap this dude. And Chet's all like, oh, we can trap him at this farm type place. So the kids are like, they start like, figuring out a way they can trap this like older man who's like very strong. And they want to see why he's constantly chasing after Joe. And they figure out it's because this little MacGuffin thing they have. Now, at some point in time, Joe makes a replica of the MacGuffin. I don't remember him doing this. And when I found this out later on towards the end, because it's 13 episodes, I'm just like, when did he do that? Now, I have fallen asleep twice watching this show. And then when I fell asleep, I decided one time I am going to rewind it, and that time I didn't. So it must have been that time I didn't, because at some point, Joe made a replica. And I don't know how he made it, what he made it out of. All I know, it looks exactly like the MacGuffin. And it's kind of like, how did this teeny tiny boy do that? Okay, no. Don't make your heroes superhuman when they're just little kids in the show. That's what I hate. So they lure the tall man to the farm. And so they trick him with the fake magic MacGuffin. He thinks it's there, he gets trapped, and then he later gets arrested. At this time, Joe and Biff decides that this MacGuffin is too dangerous for them to have, because when Joe went to his room, it was ransacked. So they decide to hide it, and they hide it in a movie theater up in the rafters and inside a wall. The only people who know it's there is Joe and Biff. Now they try to add a little suspense with, them hiding it in the wall and it being up so high up. And at this point you think, okay, maybe, something will happen. Maybe one of them might fall, slip, or something like that. But I don't think nobody does. And it's kind of like this show needs to build suspense, and it's not really doing a good job of it. Sure, the only good suspense that's coming from this is Tall Man, because this man is constantly finding these kids. And he's constantly on the hunt for them. So that's really the only really thing that kept me intrigued with this entire series was the Tall Man. But let's get into him. And then what gets me even more intrigued with him is that, okay, when he's locked up, Officer Jesse is interrogating him. He doesn't want to say nothing. And he just pretty much be quiet. And he just sleeps in his jail cell the whole time and lays in bed. And then when he does say something, he says something like very ominous and everything. Or kind of like threatening. Next thing you know, when she goes to check on him in the morning, he's completely disappeared. And she doesn't understand how. Now, I'm assuming because there's a magical element to this show, maybe this dude is magical or something. Maybe he teleported out of there or just something. But, of course, the logical explanation is somebody let him out. But who? Now, I've already revealed that the police chief Ezra, he's a bad guy. He's shady and he's working for Gloria. But we don't find that out until much later in this series, towards the end, to be in fact. Now, it would have been better if they would have revealed that the police chief is crooked. Then that would made us audience people be more suspicious, be more worried when we see him. But no, they don't do that. However, because the Hardy boys don't really trust nobody in town, they don't trust the police once they find out that the tall man has disappeared. In fact, they don't even trust Officer Jessie, which is Biff's mom. And that pisses Biff off a lot. Now, when it comes to them suspecting that the chief might be a suspect, something happens. At some point when the tall man was chasing them, he rips his shirt. And then when they start to suspect that the chief might be a suspect, they break into his house. Well, actually, Joe and Biff does. Meanwhile, Biff and Joe decides to break into Police Chief Officer Eliza's house to investigate this claw. See, when Joe and Frank was investigating something, they heard a noise. Somebody was breaking an artifact trying to look for the MacGuffin inside. That person, I believe, was JB. And so JB takes off running. And they find this like cloth. And so then later on, Biff and Joe are trying to figure out where this came from. So they go to like this clothing store and they talk to this expert. And he tells them it looks like it's old military. And so they're walking around the street. And, you know, and Biff's kind of like, okay, so we're looking for some kind of crooked military person or something like that, or maybe a crooked cop. But, you know, if it's like, it looks like military, then why wouldn't they assume it's military instead of thinking it's a cop? So then Joe's all like, oh, maybe it's a little close to home. So he starts to suspect like the people working in the sheriff department, like Officer Jessie and stuff. And that pisses Biff off because that's her mom, you know. And so then they start to suspect him. If it's not the mom, then maybe it's the police chief. Because, you know, how did the tall man get out of the jail cell? So they go break into his house. And then, of course, he's like about to come soon. Now, that's great because it builds suspense and everything. However, they get away and they find a jacket in his garbage can. And they realize that it belongs to the fabric that they found, which now makes them believe that the cop dude is working for one of like somebody who's trying to find this MacGuffin. And the cop dude is actually crooked because he's working for Joe's grandmother. From that point on, a whole lot of nothing goes on. And I mean a whole lot of nothing. But pretty much they decide, okay, let's give Frank some character development. So basically his grandma wants him to go to this very elite college. And in order to get into this elite college, something that she's a part of, you have to go through a series of tests. Also, who's going through this series of tests is Callie, because they need her to have something to do, and they need to show that she's smart. So basically, they put you in a room with a bunch of written tests, and you have to like fill it out, and they both do very well on it. And then there's like kind of like this mental test where they put you in a room, and they lock you in the room, and you have a certain amount of time you have to figure out how to get out the room. And so of course it's not the obvious choice, it's a hidden choice. And he finds, or actually he finds a hidden room in his mom's study, or in the study of the school, I should say. And so his mom supposedly, or not mom, but his grandma, I'm going to say, supposedly don't know about this hidden room. So next thing you know, he aces the like little mental exam and he figures out how to get out the room. This impresses his grandma. This impresses the headmaster at the school. So everybody's all excited with Frank. It's to show that Frank has some smarts. But he tells his grandma, you know, he doesn't want to do that, you know, and all this other stuff. And she's kind of trying to force it on him because she wants the best for like her family. And that's a problem that she has with Trudy, is that like, you know, she's always trying to force like good nature onto them so they can be successful in life. Now it's time to unpin something. So pretty much check. He picks them both up because they don't have cars. And For some reason, out of the blue, Chet starts to get jealous of the interaction between Frank and Callie. Now, remember when I said that the moment he became friends with both of them, there was going to be kind of like this love triangle jealousy type thing? Well, the show never writes it out to be that way. You automatically just assume just because of how they look and everything. And so they pretty much go every episode. Well, pretty much it's like this. When Frank is hanging out with Callie, Chet is always there. It's just the three of them. You know, they're always like hanging out. And there's never no indication that Frank likes her. None whatsoever. There's barely an interaction with Callie that might show that she likes him. It might have been that time where I fell asleep. It might not. I don't know. But as far as I've been watching this show, there's nothing that indicates that these two have lovey-dovey feelings for each other. So Chet just automatically assumes it because they're always hanging out and they're always talking that, you know, they must like each other. But he's always there too, and he's always interacting and talking with them too. So that what he but he assumes that them two like each other. So he confronts her about this. She said he's being an idiot. He decided, you know what, this ain't gonna work out. We have separate things we want to do. I want to go here for college. You want to go there. He wants to leave that town and go to a different college with his scholarship. She wants to stay there to the elite school. And he's just like, you know, this ain't gonna work out. And you like Frank and blah, 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 blah. And so I'm gonna dump you. And after he dumps her, he's all sad. Like he's the victim and stuff. And it's like, where did this come from? Like, where did this jealousy really come from? And it was never really written very well into the show. So after the test, Frank is talking to the headmaster, and the headmaster mentioned something about he knew Frank's mother. So, of course, Frank being the information guy, he starts asking questions. But then he kind of gets stopped in his tracks because the people who's working around the headmaster dude, they give him type like looks, don't want him to like start talking. Something's going on, and Frank knows it. So he's constantly asking the headmaster, and the headmaster won't say nothing. Later on in the afternoon, Frank breaks into his office. The headmaster finds out, and then he secretly tells Frank, you know, to meet him someplace. After Frank meets him in a secret location in this like garden type place in the facility, the headmaster pretty much tells him that, you know, he does believe that his mom was murdered and that they were really good friends. They might have dated back in high school, something like that. Anyways, he draws a symbol. The symbol is the circle of the eye. And he tells Frank that these people are very dangerous and this and that. And Frank, you know, wants more information. But the dude's all like, you know, I can't say nothing no more. I'll meet you tomorrow, I think, at that same location or like a coffee type place. Anyway, I'm pretty sure the dude said meet him at a coffee shop at 9 in the morning the next morning. But for some reason, Frank went back to the university. And then when he went back to the university, the headmaster dude is now gone. And he resigned, apparently. And Frank is starting to get very, very, very suspicious. That he knows there's more going on than what people are telling him. So that part is like really interesting. I'm thinking to myself, okay, the show's starting to get interesting now. And it's like 7th episode. It took that long for the show to get like really like, you know, cooking and stuff. But, you know, when it starts to get cooking, it still fades away into like bleakness because the show is just so dismal. At some point, Frank meets back up with Joe, and once again, here comes Tall Man pursuing them. He chases them on foot. They're running, and the next thing you know, somebody hits the Tall Man with a car. It turns out to be a teenage girl. She's freaking out because, you know, she killed this dude. Like, he's dead. Tall Man is now dead. Like, he's gone. No more in the show. And so she's freaking out. She said it was an accident. And you do believe, you know, it's an accident. Just the way how it happened. So anyways, they go to the police station to give their side of the story. And the girl's there. And, you know, the police people, they're tired of seeing the Hardy boys there because the Hardy boys are kind of like always getting into trouble. So anyways, as Frank and Joe are about to be driven away by Officer Jesse, go back home, they see the girl, and she's in a police car getting ready to go home, and she kind of like waves at Frank in a like cutesy kind of way. So Frank's kind of like, "Aw," and so, you know, you can tell where this relationship is about to go. Well, she meets Frank at school and she introduces herself, and she introduces herself to like all his friends and stuff like that. She introduces herself as Stacy Baker, and she seems like a pretty legit girl, like she's really nice. However, Callie is starting to get kind of jealous because she sees that Stacy and Frank are constantly hanging out. See, now they're starting to show that Callie likes Frank, and it's more like revealed, but it isn't revealed until so much later in the series. And so it's kind of like they should have done that like a lot sooner. But now she's gone full on like jealous to the point where she don't even like seeing them two like in the room together. And you know, and Stacy can kind of pick up on this a little bit. Anyways, Callie is very, very, very suspicious of this girl for unknown reasons. She's a little bit more suspicious because, you know, she ran over that dude and killed him. And so because of that, she feels she's going to do a little sleuthing of her own. Stacy told her that, you know, she went to this old school in the city, blah, blah, blah. And then Callie's kind of like, oh, I know somebody who went there. So, of course, Callie calls that person up and she tries to validate that girl's story, but she can't. So she's like, okay, this girl, something's wrong with this girl. So she tells Frank. Frank doesn't really want to believe her at first, but, you know, him being the little junior detective that he's trying to be, he's like, okay, fine. So they spy on her. And as they're spying on her, they see her they're at her house, and they see her interacting with these two people. Now, she's told people in the past that these are her uncle and aunt, and she lives with them because her dad's dead, which is true. Her dad is dead. And then as she's talking to her supposed aunt and uncle, she's berating them. She's talking to them like a boss. And so then she slaps the man, and they're like, whoa, why she just slap her uncle? Then the uncle walks to the window, and then it's revealed that both uncle and aunt supposedly have guns on their holsters. They're not uncle and aunt, they're bodyguards. So at school, Stacy is still flirting with Frank and kissing him and stuff like that, and that's pissing off Callie to where Callie and Stacy have a confrontation. And Stacy's kind of pissed that, you know, that Callie is spying on her and trying to like prove that she said who she is or not. So when Frank and Stacy talk, she reveals that her name is not Stacy Baker. Her name is actually Anastasia. Okay, this part I'm gonna mess up. It's a Russian sounding name. Bovic. It's Nabovo. It's Nabovic. No, God, see, I hate pronouncing these names, man. But yeah, anyway, so it turns out that her dad is very famous. Now Frank recognizes that last name. Remember how I said there's a bunch of bad people in this little circle of the eye, and they're looking for the MacGuffin, and they want to like take over the world, and then Gloria's dad destroyed it? Okay, here's the backstory of this. So there are the three very powerful businessmen whose last names are Esterbrook, Nobovic, and Khan. They are the fathers of these three central women in this series. One being Kanika, one being Gloria, and one being Anastasia. Now Victor Nova. I hate this pronouncing these people's names. Okay, Victor Nobovic. He is the father of Anastasia. Now, I'm not sure if Victor is the son of one of those powerful three men, or if he was one of those powerful three men. I kind of phase out if he is the father. He had her at a very late age, because this girl is the same age as Frank. So anyway, she is trying to find out who killed her father, because somebody killed Victor. And she also wants the MacGuffin for herself, because she wants to do all these powerful bad things with it. And when she found out that the tall man had was looking for the pieces of the eye, she kills him to take him out the equation, and then she cozy up to Frank, trying to, like, you know, get his grandmother a piece of the eye. Now Gloria, the grandmother, she hired the police chief, and she also hired JB to steal the eye. Kanika, she hired the tall man to get the eye. And of course, Anastasia is looking for it for herself. She doesn't really hire nobody to do anything. And Anastasia is ruthless. All these people are that's looking for the eye. They will do whatever it takes. It don't matter who dies. Even if it's their own family member. They want this MacGuffin for themselves. Well, later on in the series, JB, he kidnaps Joe. And so when Joe's on his bike, he stops him with his car, tells him to get in, because once he finds out the MacGuffin is a MacGuffin, he decides he's going to try to steal all the pieces and do it for himself. But he also decides, hey, I can also get some money by kidnapping Joe and ransom off to his wealthy grandmother. So he leaves his bike on the road. Phil sees the bike on the road, decides something is wrong, and he gets on his walkie-talkie and let everybody know. So now everybody's looking for Joe. Well, Gloria bodyguard disposes of JB very quickly, and then Chief Ezra arrests him. But then Chief lets him go and tells him, look, man, you still have a job to do. And Miss Gloria wants you to find this thing. And you do whatever it takes and whatever you have to do, but you get this thing for her. So, JB, being the master of disguise that he is, decided to go to Kanika's house. And he has this type of special gas that makes her go to sleep. He makes everybody in the whole building go to sleep in that room. And then he steals her piece of the eye. So now JB has like 2 pieces of the eye. He has the one that Joe has. Now here's the thing how he got Joe's. He tells Joe, take him to where he hid the MacGuffin, which is in the movie theater. Joe takes him there. Joe tries to look for the eye in the wall, but can't find it. So JB's all like, well, who else knew it was there? And he's like, well, only Biff. And he's like, but Biff would never steal it. So then he confronts Biff about it. And Biff tells him, yes, she did steal it because she was worried after he got kidnapped. So she gives him the piece of the eye. He gives it to JB. And he gives it to Gloria. So now JB has 2 pieces of the MacGuffin. JB then tries to break into before he tries to break into Anastasia's house, he realizes that one piece of the MacGuffin has the ability of insight. He can see within a couple of seconds into the future. And he asks the MacGuffin, where's the other piece of the MacGuffin? And it shows him is at Anastasia's place. So he uses it to get past the security guards and stuff like that. And that's when the security guard is about to hit him in the back of the head. He can see that, and then he stops the security guard. But then Anastasia is all like, well, my MacGuffin works the same way yours does. And she gets behind him and knocks him out. They beat the snot out of him pretty much. But of course, he's not dumb enough to take all pieces of the eye with him. He only has 1 or something like that. Or maybe he has only actually, I don't think he brought any of them. So anyways, he's all battered and bruised. He sees Joe. He's like, hey man, what's up? And Joe's like, man, what happened to your face? And so he pretty much tells him, this and that, and he needs the other piece of the eye. And then Joe's like, oh, you're the one who broke into my room looking for the thing, because at first, before he kidnapped Joe, he went looking in his room, broke his plane, his toys, and stuff like that. So of course, Joe tells the group that who who he's really working for, but he doesn't really tell them who he's working for. He's just saying that he's looking for the MacGuffin, and so now they know that Anastasia is really a bad person and that she has a MacGuffin. Joe decides that he's gonna follow in his great grandfather's footstep and try to destroy the eye. He has no idea how he's gonna do it because this is a magic MacGuffin, but Joe thinks he's so mature he can do whatever he wants. So he tells Biff, her and the gang, they realize something special has to do with this kind of like a shaft mine type place. It's like an abandoned mine. I forget what's so special about this place because the show it's so bleak you kind of phase out of it. But anyways, Biff and Joe are looking for this abandoned place that's underground, and they're walking in the cemetery, and next thing you know, they fall through a gigantic hole in the ground that just came out of nowhere. It's just like the ground shook a little. It didn't really shake, but like the ground was soft and it just collapsed. And they fall for a long time, and then they hit the ground. And it's kind of like, okay, that's kind of like just came out of nowhere, that they found this magic bunker type place that they're looking for. And so it's kind of like it would have been nicer if they would have used a little bit more detective skills other than looking at a map and stuff. So now Biff and Joe are lost and everybody's freaking out. Officer Jessie, she confronts Trudy, because Trudy doesn't do much of nothing in this show. Trudy disappears to the point where you just forget all about her. Kind of like the MacGuffin, it disappears a lot. And so she confronts Trudy about it, talking about, my daughter's life has been in danger ever since like she started interacting with your son, your nephew, and they get into it to the point where they now have a huge like rift, and they're having like major problems. I think to the point where they break up, but it's never really established too well that they're together, because they only kiss that one time and then they don't really interact no more. And when they do, they just talk like about what's going on. So that relationship not handled very well. Frank shows up and she's like, where's my daughter, and blah blah blah. And then Frank's like, I don't know. She's like, well, search your brother's room and something. And he's like, okay, there's something I have to show you. So Trudy shows, well, no, wait, what is it? Frank says that he thinks that he knows where Joe's at because they've been searching for something. And then it's discovered their little sleuthing board thing where they have all their clues and suspects on the suspect board. And Officer Jessie's a little pissed that her name's on there because the boys, like they say, because they don't trust Chief Ezra, they don't also trust her either. So she's pissed. Trudy's all like, I just found out about this a couple of days ago or something like that, or this morning. And then, but Jesse's not having none of it. So that's done between those two. And they don't talk no more for the rest of the series. Frank and Trudy have like a heart-to-heart discussion about how she's sad about the whole Jesse thing. And, but it's kind of like, and he's like, and I think she kind of reveals that she's in a relationship with him, or with her. And Frank's cool with it, which is kind of interesting because, like I said about Pen 15, is that this is the 80s. And, homosexuality was a very hot button topic, and people were not cool with that. But Frank's cool with it. And, most family members are when they find out stuff like that. But, they do keep it hidden because other people don't know. So Frank goes back to the place where he works at, and he tells his friends that, Joe and Biff are missing. But before they do that, Chet is still upset at Frank, and Phil can sense that, and he's like, yo, what happened and stuff. And they don't really go into it, because even Frank really don't know. But he does confront Frank a little bit about it and stuff. And Frank's like, nothing like between us, stuff like that. Anyway, but he tells them Joe and Biff are missing, and they get worried because they're friends and stuff. And, they're little kids, so they're worried. So Phil and Chet, they go on their little adventure trying to find them. And then Callie and Frank, of course, go on their own little adventure trying to find them. Now, the adventure that Chet and Phil go on, we don't see it. And it would have been nice to see it. It would have been nice to have them actually do something. That's the one thing about Nancy Drew I like. With Nancy Drew, her friends will go off looking for stuff without her because they're a group and they, and stuff like that. However, with the Hardy Boys, their group only goes looking and searching for stuff only when they're with another Hardy boy. And it gets kind of annoying. So we never get to see Chet and Phil's little adventure. But when we see them again later on in the episode, Chet's face is covered in hay and manure. Apparently something happened where Chet fell down and something, and Phil had to save him. Now this is the point where I think Phil, okay, I'm about to unpin something. Remember I said I thought Phil, I think he might be gay. Because, okay, we never see him have any love interest. We don't see him talk about like the opposite sex. Now, after they had the little heart to heart, it's one of those kind of bro awkward type things. And because, you know, Chet feels embarrassed that he has all this stuff still on his face. They didn't clean it off, but he's just have all this stuff on his face to let us know something happened when they went to go look for Joe. Then Chet's all like, hey, since you saved my life and everything, I'm gonna buy you a milkshake. Not in a weird kind of way or nothing like that. And then when he said that, he said, you know, like how we used to buy like milkshakes for each other back in the day. And then he's like, you still like this flavor, right? He's like, yeah. So I think Chet gets vanilla, and then Phil gets like chocolate, which is kind of interesting because Chet's black and Phil's white. So it makes me start to think, did them two have kind of like a thing going on or something? But it's the way Chet says, he's like, you know, not to be funny, nothing like that. And of course, when somebody says that, that means, hey man, like, you know, I'm just doing this out of the kindness of my heart, not in like a romantic kind of way. And, you know, Phil's going, oh yeah, man, I know. And, you know, just like the old days and stuff. So I'm starting to wonder if Phil might be gay. And I'm wondering if him and Chet have ever done anything, or it is just Phil. Because like I said, this is the 80s and that's a hot button topic. So they're not really like explaining. Of course, if they have a second season, it probably will be explained. Well, Callie and Frank, they end up in some building. I forget how they got there. I think it was part of a map when they found, because, oh, I forgot to mention. There's something very, very important. George Esterbrook, he has a hidden compartment in his place, in his study room. And his daughter, Gloria, she knows about this because she's been in it before when she was younger, along with her father when he would talk to the other members of the circle. But she had no way of getting in there. She said it's a special kind of key in order to get into there. And if you try to pick the lock, supposedly it's booby-trapped and it will explode and stuff like that. Somehow Frank and Joe finds this magic key that's not really a key looking thing. It's like in a weird kind of shape. How they found it out, I don't know. Because everything happens so fast with this show, and everybody just seems to know everything, and it's just like, I don't know. So in a way, they be in the study, and she's like, oh, wow, I haven't saw none of this stuff in like so many years, and blah, blah. And then there's a map. A very special map, and I guess that's how, and then that's how they figure out, you know, about the mine shaft place and this building, stuff like that. So in a way, him and Callie are there, and they're looking for Joe, and they have the walkie-talkies with them, and they're trying to like talk to Biff and Joe, but they're not answering because the signal's kind of like static. Then they find this like hidden door in the floor, and they can't open it because it's locked. And Frank is trying his best to open it, but can't. It can only be unlocked from like the other side. So during this time, Biff and Joe are kind of like, well, Joe's getting on her nerves because he's being his silly, goofy self when he's around her. He's trying to cheer her up. They're scared because there are rats down there. They're hidden in a place where nobody knows where they're at. And she's like, you know, we're going to die here. We need to find a way out. They try climbing out, but it doesn't work. So then they start like, he finds like a little, kind of like a hidden wall type thing where he goes through because, you know, things just happen in this show. And it just happens for the convenience of the plot. And so they're walking around down there with their flashlights, and she's trying to tell him that, look, man, you're wasting your time with this MacGuffin thing. You just need to leave it alone, you know, live your life. And he's like, no, man, I have to like destroy this thing and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, how are you going to do that? He's like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out later. And then she tells him a story that comes out of nowhere. She tells him that Jessie is not her real mom. She's adopted. And when Biff found that out, she went looking for her real father. And then I think what it was is that what Biff found, she didn't like. And the moral of that story is that the more and more the more and more Joe is trying to figure out who killed like his mother and this whole MacGuffin thing, he's probably not going to like the answers. And so they decide to split up. She's like, I can't take this no more. Here, you take this and that and the walkie-talkie, and I'm out. So she goes back to the place where they fell because she figures if they wait there, somebody might find them instead of searching through this like endless mine shaft place where they're not gonna be nobody's gonna be able to find them. But of course, because of plot convenience, they are found. The walkie-talkies start working. And Frank and Joe are talking on it. And he's all like, you know, I need you to like like, where are you? And he's like, I don't know. But he's like, well, if you go here, here, and here, you might be able to find the doorway that I'm standing at. And of course he does. So then he runs back without the walkie-talkie and he goes get Beth. Nothing happens, but he finds her and they go back to the location. They climb up it, they open the door, and it's like a hugging kind of moment. They go back to the cafeteria, it's like, yay, we found them and stuff. So everybody's all happy and excited. Well, towards the end of the series, we see Fenton Hardy, which is the dad, and he has now found Kanita's nephew. And wow, the dude is being like tortured and interrogated and beaten by like these mafia type people. It turns out that the nephew's aunt, Kanita, she hired these goons to like follow her nephew and torture him because she's trying to figure out like more about the eye and how to get to it and stuff like that. And she also wants to know what he talked about with Laura, which is what got Laura killed. So Fenton saves him, and then the nephew spills like everything. So then he goes back into town and sees his sons. It's a kumbaya moment until it's not. And then because pretty much he finds out that his boys have been sleuthing, he doesn't want them to do that. They go to their room, they sneak out, and then when he finds that out, he confronts Trudy about it. He's like, look, I left my sons in your care, and now they've gone like searching for clues. They're constantly getting in trouble with the police. They're constantly getting kidnapped and all this other stuff. Like, what kind of aunt are you? And she pretty much just berates, which I mean, it's true. It's like, you know, he put them in her care and they just do whatever they want. And then she berates him, talking about, you left them, you abandoned them, and blah, 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 and what were they supposed to do? And then he's all like, oh, you're right. Like, he just took that. I'm just like, no. Like, he had a reason for leaving. One, he was hired to search for this dude that might have information on why his wife got murdered, because he's like a detective type person. So he's out actually getting business done and taking names and, you know, and punching people in the face and stuff, which, like I said, this show should have been all about him. He's a lot cooler, because every scene we see him in, like doing that spy stuff, it's awesome. So pretty much a lot of stuff of nothing happens, and then next thing you know, Frank and Anastasia, they have a falling out, and she tells him, you know, whatever happens next is on your hands. And so what she ends up doing, she kidnaps Callie, because she knows Frank likes Callie. Oh no, she knows Callie likes Frank. So at this point, for some bizarre reason, Frank knows his grandmother is shady and dirty, but she gives him a nice inspirational speech, and he's like, okay. And then like pretty much he sides with her and he joins her. And I'm like, dude, all this stuff you've been going through, all this hidden stuff, all this shadiness, all these gangster type people trying to steal this MacGuffin and killing folks, and you decide to side with your grandmother and you know she ain't right? Like, that just doesn't make no sense. Joe would have never done that. So Anastasia calls the Hardy house, and Joe picks up, and she's all like, I want the other piece of the eye, I have Callie, blah blah. So next thing you know, Joe goes to like the mansion where his grandmother and Frank is at. He tells them, and something, he tells them, you know, Callie's in danger, so he wants to rescue her. So he's gonna give her the piece of the eye, because he doesn't want nothing to happen to her. And the grandma's like, no, 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 blah, blah. So she locks it up in her little special, like, safe in the hidden room, so they can't get to it. So Frank and Joe tells the group, you know, what happened to Callie. And then Anastasia got her. Now, you think Chet would be extremely devastated to, like, wanting to, like, get her and find her as soon as possible. But he's kind of nonchalant about it. Like, he's a little worried, but it's not like, whatever. And so now Phil finally gets to do something important. They decide they're gonna give Anastasia the fake MacGuffin that Joe created, which I still don't remember him ever creating, but hey, whatever, you know. Either I fell asleep or it happened off camera. So anyway, but they're all like, wait, hold on, how are they gonna tell that this is the real MacGuffin when it doesn't do his MacGuffin type thing? Because what it was, the tall man had one of those radiation detector devices, because the the MacGuffin gives off radiation. And Phil's kind of like, well, you know, we can trick them into thinking that this thing gives off a radiation signature. He tells them that in smoke detectors, there's this type of thing in there, like a little, it's something, I don't know what it is, but it's something that gives off a radiation signature. So, but it gives off small, minute traces of radiation. And so they decide, so they get the little detector thing, because somehow they still have it, a little radiation detector thing from when, I guess, the tall man, they captured the tall man. And so they use it on the little device that's inside the smoke detector. And it's true, it gives off a radiation signature. So they start taking apart all the fire detector type things, and they get the little piece out. They kind of like glue them together, and they make it into like a bracelet type thing they put around Frank, and he has a long sleeve shirt on to cover it up. And so it's the goons that make the exchange, the one that will pretend to be the aunt and the auntie. So when they go to make the exchange for Callie for the MacGuffin, the most plot device thing happens ever. Okay, instead of them taking the MacGuffin and scanning it with their radiation detecting thing, they allow Frank to hold it in his hand. And when they scan him, of course, they scan in his hand, and for some reason they scan it over his wrist area where the little radiation bracelet thing is at, and it gives off the radiation signature. And it's just like, really? That's how they tricked these adults that have been like killing people and bodyguarding people for a long time? Like, instead of them taking it and scanning it, they just scan at him holding it. But anyway, they make the exchange, and they don't harm Callie at all, so she's totally fine. But she's pissed, and now she wants revenge on Anastasia. It's during this time that Joe, Phil, and Biff are now trying to sneak into the little hidden room at Gloria's place. And so what it is that they okay, Joe has the key, so they're inside the little room. Biff's not Biff. Yeah, Biff goes with him, and Phil kind of like the lookout. Somehow, I forget how, why, Biff decides to shine a light, a little projector light, through this weird object, and it puts these little dots on the map. How or why? Who knows? Who knows? And so, like, they discover the magic MacGuffin machine thing is in this location. But then to add a little suspense, they're about to be found out. So Phil makes like a distraction while what's his name, Joe tries to get out, but the door closes, and then as you know, Biff is stuck in there. So he's all like, I'll have the key, I have to open it up. And she's like, no, I have the key, you gave it to me, remember? So now she's trapped in there. So to make more suspense and show how smart they are, they go to like a ventilation system, and she puts the magic key thing in the vent. And then so Joe can't reach it, but he gets a clothes hanger and he gets it, just to show, oh, how clever these kids are. It's not suspenseful, it's very lackluster, it's very dry and bleak. Meanwhile, Fenton, he has Keana and a nephew, and he makes Keana confess on tape what all happened, why she hired the hitman to beat up her nephew, what happened to Laura, and all this other stuff. And it's revealed that Keana and Gloria hired somebody to kill Victor. Or actually, you know what? I think he made her lie on the tape and say that she was involved in it too, just so she can disappear. And he tells her plain and simple like this: leave town and don't you ever show up again. Leave this whole MacGuffin thing alone and blah, 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 blah. And she does that. So it's kind of like she's not even really that all big around of a villain or very even important to like this series. Like, you could have easily written her out. But now they have like a video confection and like, you know, and the nephew's messed up face, and so they can like convict her at any time. So, you know, Fenton tells, like, you know, he meets back up with his sons, and I forget what happens, but Frank finds out that his grandma's a little shady now, because and then something else happens. I totally forget what. I kind of like spaced out of this show because it's so boring. But pretty much, Gloria and Anastasia decide to work together because they each have, like, one of them has two pieces of the MacGuffin, the other one has one. And so they decide they're gonna combine them together and just use it together and all this other stuff. So Fenton and the kids, they all show up. Well, not all the kids, just Frank and his sons, pretty much, Frank and Joe. So they all show up at this abandoned like place underground where this magic MacGuffin machine is, and they're assembling the three pieces. Well, as soon as they're about to put the third one in, the Hardys show up and they try to stop it. I think a scuffle happens and stuff. Everybody's like fighting now, and Callie, she's there too. And so she gets her revenge on Anastasia and gives her this huge telegraph like punch to the face and knocks her out. But then somebody assembles the MacGuffin. When the MacGuffin gets assembled, it starts to like seal itself and heal itself, and then it turns blue. And then all this crazy like special effect blue sparkly stuff starts happening. Frank is trying to get the MacGuffin out the MacGuffin machine, and he touches it. When he touches it, his body like levitates in the air, and it's kind of like frozen with all these sparkly things going around, and he's being surged with the energy. You kind of see it in his eyes a little bit. And then the MacGuffin, it just like sends out this distortion waves and knocks everybody out and on their feet. And the strangest thing happens. Frank is in like La La Land, but wakes up to the moment his mom was alive and she was talking to his grandmother. He's not there physically, more like mentally in spirit. And nobody can see him. And he overhears the entire conversation that his mom and grandmother are having. She was telling him that, pretty much what is like this. Laura found out about the MacGuffin. She trying to tell her mom, don't use it, blah, 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 blah. And her mom's like, I don't care. And then Laura's all like, I'm in danger. I feel like somebody's after me and stuff like that. So Laura goes off. And then she gets into the car accident. Frank wakes up. And he tells everybody what happens. He's pissed at his grandma. Because he said, like, mom came to you for help. And you didn't care, and all you care about was your little magic MacGuffin. And she's all like, no, that's not true. I do care about your mother, but she cared about the MacGuffin a whole lot more. And so then this comes out of nowhere. Gloria's assistant, personal assistant, and kind of bodyguard dude, he telling Frank, listen to your grandmother. She knows what she's talking about. She doesn't want to destroy the world. She does love your mother, and blah, blah, blah. Then he quotes something. And the thing he quoted was something similar to what Frank's mom said. And Frank decides in that split second, it was you. You killed my mom, didn't you? You was the one who ran her off the road and murdered her. And it's kind of like, how did he deduce that just because he cited a phrase the mom said? Anybody could have done that. But for plot convenience. And then Gloria's kind of like, no, tell me you didn't do it. He's like, yes, I did do it, and I did it for you. It's not implied that the bodyguard dude is in love with Gloria, and it's not implied necessarily that he has found a respect for her. So it's one of the two, but we don't know which because the show never explains, and because the bodyguard never really shows up that much and does anything. We just don't know. Maybe he's in love with Gloria. Maybe he just has a lot of respect for her. I don't know. Alright? Like, I don't know. Like, it's just never explained in this show. So then, in classic, like, Indiana Jones type fashion, the room still is shaking and rumbling. Everybody's like, we have to get out of here. The bodyguards pick Anastasia up and drag her off. And she's like, no! Because she wants the MacGuffin for herself. And then next thing you know, of course, the bodyguard dude, personal assistant, he's trying to get the MacGuffin, and debris collapses on top of him and kills him. Because they have to get rid of him. Anyways, everybody gets out safely. Gloria and the police chief dude, they're now arrested and behind bars. Fenton decides, you know what, he tells Trudy, we were only supposed to be here for the summer, but why don't we stay? And Trudy's like, oh, that's great. So then the boys are happy because they don't want to leave their friends. And then, there's like a little montage type thing going on. JB once again breaks into Joe's room and he gives him a gift and he gives him a letter telling him, he's all like, this town's a little dangerous. I need to get out while I'm still alive. You're a great friend. Pretty much just sorry for trashing your room and everything, but here's a gift. He gives him like this type of radio type thing, I think. And Joe's all happy because he now has this like radio type thing. I'm just like, whatever. That whole friendship is freaky. A grown man friends with a little boy. Like the whole JB Cox and the whole Joe thing is so weird. Okay, like this is one dumb scene that happened and why this show is so weird. So, Joe is missing and Frank is looking for him. And they're all, well, first they're at the home and Fenton's there, Trudy's there, and Frank is there. And, they're having a heart-to-heart discussion. And then Trudy goes into Joe's room because she thinks Joe's in there, but he's not. And JB's in there, all like messed up looking face because he got the crap beat out of him. She screams and hollers. In runs the guys. And so Fenton's all like, hey man, who are you? And JB's kind of like, well, who are you? So then he closes it in, and then Frank's all like, oh, you're that dude who's friends with Joe. He's like, what? So then they close the door. And then they have like, and then so Frank and Trudy and Fenton are having like a nice little discussion in a whimsical kind of way. I guess a little humorous kind of way. I'm thinking to myself, okay, wait, this dude just broke into your house. He's in your son's bedroom. He won't tell you who he is. His face is jacked up. The room is a mess for him looking through everything again. And they just leave him in the room as they having a heart-to-heart family, like 1970, 1980 sitcom kind of way. It's out of place. It's weird. It makes no sense. Then they open the door and, of course, JB hauled it out of there. And it's just like, what? The dude broke into your house in your son's bedroom and y'all are just having an 80s sitcom kind of feel like heart to heart. Like that just doesn't make no sense. This show is so badly written. We see a bunch of FBI type agents in the like MacGuffin cavern, and so they find the MacGuffin and they take it away like what typical FBI type people do in these type of shows and stuff. Oh, it also, Frank and what's her name, Callie, they finally kiss because, well, Callie, she kisses him because she's the one who likes him and he likes it. And it's kind of like, he could at least kissed her, but, it's never shown that he really likes her, but. So now them two about to be a thing, and of course that's going to piss Chet off. And then we see a glimpse of Frank and his brother just riding into like the sunset on their bikes, kind of like how they did in the first episode. And I will say it's weird seeing Frank on that tiny little bike. But like I said before, it's a cool 80s kind of moment feel. Because kids used to do that. They used to ride their bikes and stuff. Before now they became zombies on their tablets. So that's kind of like a cool thing to see. And then the show ends. And then the show ends and I'm just like, thank God. It took me 3 long months just to finish this show. Like, it's sad. And in between watching this show, I decided to watch 2 other shows, the Pen 15 and that Disney one I told you about. And it's just like, this show had everything going for it and it just ruined it because the show is very slow, it's dreary, it's bleak, it's uninspired. It pretty much just feels like every other type of treasure show you watch, but it's a whole lot more crappier. There's so much other better stuff that is similar to this that is just so much better. Like Tomb Raider, this thing, it really feels like the Tomb Raider movie. Like it just really does in so many ways. And it's just like, why couldn't it be cool like Tomb Raider? Why couldn't it be cool like Relic Hunter? Why couldn't it be cool like any other show? It's just, this show is just so dreary and dismal, man. Like And I hate saying that because I want to say something positive about this show. But I don't even know if I have a favorite character. Like, I don't even have a favorite character. Biff is cool because, you know, she's the only one who actually has, like, real smarts in her head. But it's like, that's not enough. And it's just like, oh no, I know who's my favorite. Fenton. He's cool. Fenton is awesome. But it's just kind of like, you know, this show could have been and should have been so much better. And it's really like just sad that people just can't write and can't direct no more. Like the acting is fine and everything, but it's like this show is just dismal. And like when I go online, I'm seeing all these mixed reactions. A lot of other people feel this show is so much boring and that Nancy Drew is just so much better than this show. Even though Nancy Drew has its flaws. But like I said before, Nancy Drew is a whole lot better than this television show. And it's kind of sad because kind of Hulu does kind of fall in that realm of having kind of like boring shows but with a cool premise. But it's kind of like, if you're gonna go the MacGuffin route, then you go the full-on MacGuffin route. You know, you also don't have the MacGuffin disappear and don't really do nothing. And they don't even really explain what this thing does that's so dangerous that everybody wants it. Like, other than making people lucky with one piece of it or having an insight to see in like a couple seconds in the future, what else does this thing does? Like, they don't explain it. So that's my review, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.